I think that's wisdom. It's about what's coming to you and through you, not about your ego. A lot of people are thinking it's like, oh, I'm delivering this down to you, to help you up and giving you this hand. And in reality, I think God chooses us to hear something because we both need it, and it creates a deep connection. And there is a resonance. Like maybe we couldn't hear that message if we weren't needing to deal with it as well.
Hello and welcome to Get Yourself Optimized. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer. It is my pleasure to have Lisa Cini with us today. Lisa is a best-selling author, acclaimed speaker, and award-winning designer who revolutionizes living, aging, and inclusive environments. She's CEO and founder of 3 firms, Mosaic Design Studio, Best Living Tech, and Infinite Living. Her best-selling books include Hive, The Simple Guide to Multi-Generational Living, and Boom, The Baby Boomer's Guide to Preserving Your Freedom and Thriving as You Age in Place. She's also an award-winning docuseries. Amazon Prime, she has Infinite Living, Secrets of the Werner House. Her podcast is What's Your Next Move? Aging on Your Own Terms. Lisa, it's so great to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
So let's first of all start with your origin story. How did you get so involved in this world of aging in place and thriving as you age and assisted living environments and that sort of stuff? Like, how did this become a passion for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've thought a lot about, why did I end up here? Like I originally wanted to do interior design for retail environments and ended up then going into healthcare, which, when I was younger, I wanted to be a doctor. And I ended up in senior living. And when I thought back about it, I realized I'm surrounded by longevity. So my kids, who are now 26 and 29, at one point had 6 great-grandparents alive. Great-grandparents. I had one side that was the Italian-German side. They were 99 and 100 when they passed. I had a great-grandfather that lived to 92. Then my other grandparents were 96 and probably late 80s because he worked in a coal mine. But longevity is definitely the story of our family on both sides, as is marriage. And seeing that unfold without going into senior living or at the very last stages, and how our family kind of worked through memory loss, not memory loss, having the matriarchs hold everything together, I think is really why I ended up going into it, because I saw that there was a lack of dignity, freedom, and independence. And they use the term ageism now, which is a new term, but people would just write off people that were getting older. And I didn't see that. So, I always said, let's do things the way I would want my grandparents to live in. Or can I help someone with a conversation and help their parents? And just basically golden rule, take care of people the way you wanted to be taken care of.
Yeah. And you had a grandmother who lived with you as she had Alzheimer's, right?
She did. So my grandmother, who was just a lady, Southern West Virginia Baptist, my grandfather had passed. My grandmother and grandfather had lived with my mother and father. And I had a 90th birthday party for her. So all my cousins came in, and it was this kind of like, hey, we're going to send you off, right? We're going to tell you how much we love you. We did a book and wrote all the great stories. And she danced at the party. And I thought, oh my gosh. 1, Baptists don't typically dance. But 2, I thought, she's really not going to die soon. Like, she's going to live. And I had envisioned, as the oldest daughter of 5 children, that my parents would move in with us. And I didn't have room for her. So I spent the next 2 years kind of planning that and then moving us all together. So my kids were in high school. My husband, my parents were in there in the late 70s, and my grandmother at 92 then with Alzheimer's. And we did that life together, and actually wrote one of the books about it, Hive, and found that so many more people were doing this and struggling with it, and also had the wonderfulness of it that you get with truly being connected generationally, which I don't think we often get to hear the stories anymore when you're spending a couple hours on Christmas.
How was it to see her decline in terms of her mental faculties with Alzheimer's? It must have been really difficult for you.
Yeah, that it's a hard question because she was such a lady. She never went out of the house without her hair done and her makeup on and her purse, and she never drove a day in her life. But she was smart and very spiritual. I was embarrassed for her, and that's kind of the best way to say it. She didn't know, but I was embarrassed for her. I remember one time she came out of her little apartment suite that we had, and she was in her bra and underwear, and my son, who was a teenager, saw her. And it's not that she was showing anything that any bathing suit wouldn't show, but I knew she would be mortified if she knew she had done that. And, that's the really hard part of seeing somebody decline. And she'd also get confused and angry. And sometimes I loved her, but I didn't like her.
How long did she end up living?
4.5 years with us. And she died in the home. And it was wonderful. It was, from the standpoint, the last couple months were hard, really hard. But every day my kids got to come home from school and see their grandma, and they got to learn the long game of life, which I don't think a lot of kids get to learn anymore. She also got to have that vibrant life that kids bring from playing the piano and having chickens, and we had bees and rabbits and those types of things, and being able to be with people that loved her every single day. It was very much mutually beneficial for all of us.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, what's the biggest gift that came out of this experience, this challenge of her decline and all that, and providing her a great deal of comfort and certainty by letting her live out the last part of her life with loved ones instead of in a facility.
So I think there are different gifts to everyone. For me, I got to actually spend time with her, and I found out that she had played the violin in high school, that she was the star in the High School Musical, that she played basketball, which I had no idea they even let girls play sports back then. So I didn't know her before she was a wife, mother, and grandmother. And I got to actually find that out. And that happens in the space in between that you don't normally get to have. And that was very, very precious to me. I was actually quite saddened by it to a certain extent, because I thought, I wish I would have known that a lot sooner. The conversations I could have had with her and things we could have shared. On the other hand, my kids, my son who's 29 would tell you that learning to get grandma in the car, out of the car, into the beauty shop, be introduced to everyone in the beauty salon that knows everything about your life, and then pick her back up, do the same thing all over again, was a doctorate in how to have patience and listen and really see people and meet them where they are. And then my daughter would probably say that, one of the things that she did really well was my mom would tell her, grandma to take her pills. My mom was the primary caregiver, and grandma would argue because she didn't remember that she had taken them. And they'd get upset. And Adelina was able to really say, you know what, you're right, but this is a different one. Could you do this for me? And to care for someone that has cared for you, I think creates wisdom that most kids don't get to have.
And one thing that elderly tend to face is a lot of marginalization and losing their voice and their own kind of independence and advocacy for themselves and so forth. How have you served as a voice for the voiceless, advocating for those, not just your grandmother, but for those people who are in that compromised position, whether they're suffering from memory loss or they're just simply incapacitated in some way, or just not really seen as someone important anymore? I know in certain cultures, like in Japan and Native American cultures, the elderly are looked up to and are revered and respected. But in most cultures, they're kind of thrown away. So how do you stand for those people who don't have the ability to stand for themselves?
So one of the ways is reminding people that, everybody dies, and there's kind of a season for it. And it's a lot easier to swallow when someone's 92 or 80 or 100 than when they're 19. And we had my nephew die when he was 19. And my grandmother, it was the first week she was living with us. And I talk about the fact that I was pretty angry with God, that he had taken away this, life that was just at the beginning, And yet this other person was ready to go. I mean, ready to go. She said it. I'm ready to go be with the Lord whenever, and she was still there and she was losing herself. And like, how is that just and fair? What you realize is that as long as she was there, she had a gift to give. If you listened to it and if you met her where she was, and some of those gifts that I just told you, but it might be that she just didn't get wrapped up in the fact that, my kid didn't get an A and she was able to talk to them and they didn't have to feel depressed. They had to go and help grandma, so they couldn't be on social media as much. What you might think of as a burden can actually be a huge gift. There was a lot of wisdom in sitting in silence and just being with someone instead of feeling the need to fill the space with chatter and talk. I just recently experienced this with my father, who had a surgery and then it didn't go well and we had to take him back to the hospital. He's 85 and they wrote him off. I mean, I literally saw them just check a box in their head and say, he's going to die, and had to go to the ICU. And I said, look, you don't understand my legacy here. His father was almost 100, just days short of 100 when he passed. His mom was 99. So the statistics, I can't say it, are not what you should be looking at. You need to look at him as him, an individual, not what you think the metrics are. And if you do that, how would you treat him? Because he has so much value to our family that we're not going to go down fighting and just let you write him off. Same thing with if someone can't hear or someone can't move around quickly. There are tons of little tiny things you can do for them to give them back their dignity and independence and freedom. And they don't cost that much. And I have some very wealthy, smart friends. You're one of the very smartest people I know. And they'll say, well, mom doesn't want that, or I showed it to her. And I'm like, when you give a gift, people don't get the right to not say they want it. So you don't tell her it costs money. You just do it for her. You show up over the weekend and you put the new bidet toilet seat in. You put the new little grab bar that looks like a toilet paper holder in. You just do the things for her that are going to make her life easier, but you don't ask her about it. You just give the gift.
Good advice. Have you given any kind of TED talk on this topic of how to elegantly assist your elderly loved one with?
Not yet. I have, that's been on my goal list for a year or two, and I've spoken a lot. I've been on national stages, but I would like to do that because I think I could reach and help more people. I think there is what folks don't understand is that if you look at life and vulnerability, at the beginning of your life, you're highly vulnerable and you're tiny and you're easy, right? So when you have a 2-month-old, you just, somebody's crying, you throw them up here, you pat them, you take care of them, you figure out what's going wrong. And they don't really have a mental issue with, somebody's wiping my rear end right now. Somebody's changing me. Somebody's feeding me right now. There's no kind of PTSD about that. Matter of fact, they're fairly selfish. They're fairly like, yeah, give. But as we get older and we need help, we are acutely aware, most often, that we are a burden. And so not only are we more fragile, but we are also having our dignity taken away, and then compound that by feeling like we're less than and all we are is a burden to the people we love. And so that can shut us off. And so you have to really think about all the social and spiritual issues that come along with that when you help someone, to not make them feel like they're a burden and to give them the one up. And people always say, well, they don't understand technology. And I'm like, you know what? I disagree 100%. They have dealt with more technology and more changes in technology than we ever have. And when they answer the remote control and you think it's funny, you can go into a hotel room and they'll say, use your phone as a remote control, hook it up. So they're not biased by what things can do. And they actually take on to technology way better, I think, than we do. It's just a lot of our tech really isn't user friendly. If you have to read a manual, I had to read like a 2-hour manual to figure out how my car worked. That's not okay.
Yeah, there's still features I haven't figured out.
Yeah. Exactly. My kids get in there and they're like, Mom, why aren't you using this? And I'm like, oh, it's just too much.
Now, you mentioned earlier how you were angry with God and wondering how is this just and fair. Where have you gotten to with that? Are you at peace with how things work? Have you made sense of all this, or you're still perplexed by it?
So one of the things that happened, that's a big question, right? Was that when my nephew passed, and my grandmother was very confused even, and we're trying to figure out, she's asking the wrong questions at the funeral and thinking it's her nephew and instead of her great grandchild. It was real hard. And then we all went together at Thanksgiving and we stood around and held hands like we normally do. And we said each one what we were thankful for. And it was like, and this is going to sound a little weird, but it was like when my nephew, we called him Little Matt because my brother's named Matt, his uncle. And when Matt died, it was like he exploded into a much bigger level of love in him. We could see it in everybody from the stories that they told, from all the people that came all over the country to come to his calling hours, from coworkers that I had never met. And then I heard, stories about Matt here. People got tattoos with his dirt bike number on him. There was just such an explosion of love and being connected that it was a salve for the wound. I still miss him greatly. But I also know beyond a shadow of a doubt that he was supposed to go and that it was his time and he burned bright and we're all the better for having him in our life. And grandma being there we don't get to choose the when and the how. She would have certainly, if she would have been conscious and God would have given her a choice, she would have made that without a doubt. It wasn't a selfish thing on her part. But I think there were reasons why it all played out and how many more people feel loved and connected and helped because of it.
Why do you say that it was without a shadow of a doubt time for Matt to go?
I'm at a coaching program right now. Strategic coach that I do. And I was actually here, and it was almost 10 years ago. It was 9 years ago in October. And I was probably right now, actually 9 years ago. And I had kind of put it in a box, tied it up in a little bow. I'm the kind of person in the family that takes care of everybody and holds it all together. And I'm at this business meeting and I just hit me like a ton of bricks. So I went to the back room and one of the guys that I pray with said, okay, let's pray. Let's go back into the conference room. And not much different than what this room is right now. And while we were praying, I felt Matt come and hug me and give me the biggest smile. He just had a really big smile and said, I'm good, Aunt Nene. I'm really good. I just knew everything was right beyond a shadow of a doubt. And that was the only time, and that was it. And it was just beyond a shadow of a doubt that he was where he was supposed to be.
That's beautiful. Have you had other messages or, without a doubt, signs or anything that let you know that, for example, your grandmother is doing well on the other side, that other loved ones, other like great grandparents are partying over there, or what?
Definitely have had other signs, and even people that weren't close to me. I had an assistant that we had worked together for years, and her brother was dying of cancer, and he was at a teaching hospital, so they were allowing them to experiment on him as part of, they knew he was going to go. And I had went to visit him with her, and I came back and I had a dream and it was him. And he said, you've got to tell her to let me go. And so I didn't know him hardly at all. Like I'd met him twice. And I came in the next day and I'm like, Jody, you got to let him go. Brian came to me last night and you got to let him go. And she said, okay. And they went and they talked to him and he was, passed within a day. Afterwards, I had another dream about him. I said that he was like a bird, a cardinal, and said, thank you.
Wow. So I just want to share with you something I wrote down about a half a minute ago, because I take notes while I I do my interviews, so that, whatever pops in, I'm asking about. Guess what the word is I wrote down about half a minute ago?
Cardinal?
Cardinal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't tell her. She came in a little bit later and she said, it was really weird. This cardinal was hanging outside my front door and just would not leave. And I said, well, I better tell you now. That was Brian.
Yeah.
He just wanted to tell you, wow.
Yeah. So the thing I was going to share about the cardinal, so I don't come up with questions in advance for these interviews. And I might have said this to you, Lisa, before, or I'm sure I must have said this on previous episodes for my listener to know that I just channel the questions. I don't prep because I'm not trying to wing it. I'm just trying to step aside, my ego step aside, so that I just am in a place of service and just asking what is meant to be asked. And I was meant to raise this as a point, that the whole cardinal thing is when you have an animal act out of character, like a cardinal. That there was this Facebook video that went viral where the I think it was the grandmother or the mother told her daughter, I'm gonna give you a sign and it'll be a cardinal or something like that. And then after the mother passed, this cardinal came and visited the daughter and landed on her hand or on her arm and wouldn't leave. And then finally, after a while kind of shaking her arm, the cardinal flew, but then came and landed on her shoulder. Something that unusual, that's out of character for an animal, is without a doubt sign, because that can happen. You can have the soul of a loved one temporarily take over the animal, and it's completely out of character. So
I agree 100%.
yeah, it's amazing. The unseen world is more real than the seen world. And that wouldn't make sense to most people. But once you've tasted this, once you've glimpsed it, you can't unsee it.
No, you can't. And I think, there's such a peace to know that we're all still here, that we're all still part of this, that we're all still connected. There is such, they say the peace that passes all understanding. There is, even when I said that I'm okay with my nephew's death, it worried me of how someone might take that, because he's 19 and everyone's so judgmental now. I think it's very much like a surgeon cutting out a cancer and then somebody else doing something horrific. And if you don't understand the context of it, it's very hard to know whether this person's a serial killer or that person's a surgeon.
When we base our decisions and the actions and our belief systems on fitting in, on looking good and not looking bad, then we deny our true nature as creator beings, co-creating with God, and then we just play small. So if you have no enemies, you're playing small.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have critics, if you don't have haters or trolls, they're just people who misunderstand you and your motives, or read into things or whatever, or have an axe to grind. You're not there for them. I remember this from one of the trainings I attended with Bob Allen. He's an amazing best-selling author, and he explained that you're here. The hand raisers, you're here for the smiley faces in the audience. Don't focus on the frowny faces and try to win them over if you're up on stage. Just focus on the smiley faces. You're not here for the frowny faces. The frowny faces aren't here for you.
Yeah, I think I heard one of my friends a long time ago. She said, Lisa, you're magnetic. And I got all like, my ego got filled up and I'm like, oh, I'm magnetic. And then she said, that means you're going to repel a lot of people. And she said, you're also going to attract a lot of people.
Yeah.
But don't try to go after the people you're going to repel. Try to serve the people you're going to attract. It's a lot easier. And that goes for not just your clients and your friends, but your employees.
Yep. Everybody, even family. You're going to repel some family members.
Yeah. And I think a lot too about how I have been different in my journey and how much I must have been a pain in the rear end. And I still am, I'm sure. But I have more grace now because I'm able to actually look at myself and say, okay, I've grown in this space. I'm able to take a beat here, where before I would have just said, no, I expect perfection, or I would have done it this way, or whatnot, instead of, hey, the world didn't end because we, didn't draw that line correctly. I think it allows me to really understand that when you go and start in school, whether it's like for me, design school, you're not expected to be a seasoned designer. You're expected to learn how to crawl and then walk and learn how to talk. And so the expectations aren't this, yet I think now we have this like weird timeline expectation that either spiritually or in business or as a parent, we're supposed to be at this higher level, and we offer no grace for folks that aren't, that maybe are making assumptions and acting out of fear or pain.
Mm-hmm. Yep. One thing you said that I just want to give you a little bit of a hard time on. You said that you're a pain in the ass for some people. And I think there's a better way to frame it, because your words are powerful. You create your reality with your beliefs and your words and your expectancy, positive or negative. So I might invite you to instead think of this as dissonance. So if you're out of resonance with certain family members or employees or colleagues or industry folks, it's not that you're a pain in the ass. It's that you don't resonate at the frequency they're at. And you probably are doing that by choice. You don't want to drop down to that frequency. So you resonate at a higher frequency, and then you attract the people into your life who are at that similar frequency to you.
Oh, that's perfect. That is so powerful. That is so powerful. And I've actually been thinking about that a lot lately of, when you read in the Bible that like the heavenly host and the angels are singing, and that's like the biggest thing, right? Mm-hmm. It's sound. It's resonance. There is something that changes, I think, in us on a molecular level. I remember hearing CeCe Winans. I don't know if you've ever heard her sing or not, but live in concert. And she had, a whole stadium, and she was singing Hallelujah, just that. And everybody else was singing it with her. And it was like an LSD trip. I mean, I've not been on LSD, but what I would imagine and what people describe it, like it felt like the ceiling was opening and everybody was vibrating together on the same level, and that we could have moved mountains. I mean, it really was tremendous. So much so that I bought tickets in another city to take my mother-in-law there, and it just wasn't the same thing. There was something special that happened during that previous concert.
Yeah. Amazing. I had an experience that was like an LSD trip too. I was in India, and I had just gotten touched on the head by a monk, an Indian monk, and everything was in Technicolor like a cartoon. And I just felt this deep sense of peace. And that's when I went from agnostic, almost atheistic my whole life, age 42, to connected to God. I won't even say a believer, because belief doesn't even begin to grasp or to convey the power of this. God is an experience, not a belief, is what the monks had taught me there on that trip.
Yeah, so you got plugged in.
I did.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now there's a movie I want to mention to you, and I want to get your take on it. I bet you've seen it. It's an old movie. It's called Tuesdays with Morrie.
Yes.
What do you want to share about that movie? I just recently rewatched it. I watched it with my 27-year-old daughter, and it was profound. I saw it maybe a decade or 15 years ago, something like that. But then I just recently resaw it in the last couple of weeks. So it's a beautiful, powerful movie. It's about death, but it's also about living. And I just think there are so many lessons and teaching points in there. What would be the thing that stands out for you?
So I think when we honor other people, and even if it feels like it's kind of work sometimes, which at least I took that from that, where he was showing up and he was doing it to honor him, but he was showing up. That quite often the gift that we get is, 10 times, 1,000 times what we think we're ever getting or giving to someone else. It was actually meant for us. So when we think we're doing something for somebody else, it's actually meant for us.
Yes. As an adjunct to that, or a corollary, when we're giving advice, let's say spiritual advice in particular, I've noticed this, to somebody else, that is meant for us as well. So I'm like, oh, you're going through this. I have just the book for you, or I have just the video or seminar to recommend to you. Or, here's a great quote that might help you, or whatever. I'm listening for the wisdom nugget for me in that same statement, because I know that that's for me at the same time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think that's wisdom. It's about what's coming to you and through you, not about your ego.
Yeah.
A lot of people are thinking it's like, oh, I'm delivering this down to you, to help you up and giving you this hand. And in reality, I think God chooses us to hear something because we both need it, and it creates a deep connection. And there is a resonance. Like maybe we couldn't hear that message if we weren't needing to deal with it as well.
Yeah. Well, everything is so precisely orchestrated from above that makes total sense. If there's nothing random happening, something is there for you. It's on purpose. So what's the purpose?
Mm-hmm. Most definitely.
I remember reading a quote, I think from 500 years ago or whatever. It was a famous rabbi, and see if I can find.
I was going to say, gosh, you're old.
Yeah, right.
500 years ago.
But I recently read it. This great quote. It's from hundreds of years ago. It's from a very righteous, holy rabbi called the Baal Shem Tov. Nothing is by chance. Every single event or experience in a person's life is predetermined and purposeful. So if a person chances to witness the degradation of his fellow, he must realize that he too suffers from the same lack in one form or another. Otherwise, why would divine providence have caused him to see his fellows failing? Obviously, to open his eyes to something that he must correct in himself. So even if one is your enemy, and justifiably so, even if his moral and spiritual downfall is one of his own making, it could have happened without your having been made aware of it. That you have witnessed it has nothing to do with him. It is a message to you, enjoining you to deal with a similar negative element, be it in the subtlest of forms within yourself.
I love that. That is perfect.
Yeah. So if I'm coaching somebody, I know that there is a reason, not just for me to hear that, but to also see the reason for the person's challenge, because I'm learning from not just the coaching I'm giving, that I'm receiving, that I'm just channeling, but also I'm learning from the challenge the person's going through. So maybe I need to go through the experience with that person, or at least listen to what they're going through with so much compassion that I can experience it myself to some degree, and learn the lesson without having to go through it personally. Maybe,
Yeah. I mean, that's what family does, right? That's what, when you care about somebody, like if you're an older brother or sister and you do something stupid, the caring thing is not to hide that mistake. Is to tell your brother and sister about it, and it got you in trouble, and don't make the same mistakes I made. Now you still have to have a heart to listen, and that goes for, in your business and everything. So much so we do a transformer, every single person on our team every week, and everybody has to admit to something that they failed at or learned from and out themselves. And it does a couple things when you do that. It one, creates authenticity and safety. Because when you do it enough, you're no longer hiding from the secrets. And then the other thing it does is let people feel like, oh, they got my back. They were willing to be vulnerable to make sure I didn't make that XYZ mistake. So it's a really powerful thing.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned Transformers, so that's insider baseball or inside baseball? I think it's inside baseball. So that's inside baseball for us strategic coach folks. It's called an experienced transformer. That's a tool from Strategic Coach, from Dan Sullivan. And if you could really briefly explain the concept behind experienced transformer and how somebody who's listening and never done Strategic Coach can apply that in their own life, what would that be?
Perfect. So you take an event or something that happened that you want to improve on, or that you failed at, or that didn't go well, and you write down what you own in it. Like you, not like, Bobby didn't do this. It's like, maybe I didn't tell Bobby there was a deadline. So you write down what you own in it, and then you brainstorm, what worked, what didn't work. Actually, I just did this with someone that I was mentoring, and she had to be dropped down a grade in geometry. And I said, okay, what happened here? And she goes, well, when I took algebra, I cheated on the final exam. I cheated. And I said, okay, what worked? And she said, well, nothing worked. And I said, no, you passed algebra. That worked. And so there was something that worked in it. But what didn't work was it created this domino effect of downfalls for her now in the next level of math. And so you brainstorm those positives and negatives, and then you rewrite it as if you could go back in time. How would you do it again? And scribe that out so that other people don't make the same mistake, and that you learn the lesson. And so you basically take lemons and make lemonade.
It's great. So what's an example of something that you have rewritten or re-experienced differently, more powerfully the second time around by using an experience transformer?
Oh gosh, we do this so much. Just recently, I don't want to talk on the phone. I'd rather do like a written communication with an email, not even a text. And I created some mistrust with my team because I did not communicate properly and fast enough on the phone. And it was because of my own selfish behavior. Like, I don't want to get caught up in a long conversation. I really don't want to talk to you. I'm more of a black and white kind of person, but there was miscommunication on my part because of that, a lack of trust. They felt I was hiding things from them, and it cost us a project with a client. And owning it, I very easily could have went back and allowed myself some discomfort to communicate in a proper way to who really needed to hear it. And how I learned from that is that I was speaking Greek and they spoke English. And yet I expected the results to be exactly the way that I wanted them. But I wasn't giving them the courtesy to even speak their language. Yet I was irritated, by the outcome. Moving forward, I have to recognize that communication is not always what we think it is. How we communicate is not how someone else communicates. Mm-hmm. And in order to get the desired outcome, I've got to really work hard at making sure I'm using the right tool, the right language, the right timing, painting the vision the way I need to be painting it. And so it really helped me. And I've had my business 25 years, and every single day I have to transform something.
Yeah, it reminds me of CBT. Reminds me of that. And it stands for cognitive behavioral therapy, where you have this kind of acronym of, I don't know if it's an acronym so much as it's kind of a framework, where A plus B equals C is the first version, and where the activating event is A, B is your belief system, and C is consequences. But if you apply CBT and re-experience that event after the fact with a new and improved belief system, so now if you re-experience it this time where you add D and E to the equation, you still have the activating event that happened already, and your belief system, you may not have completely overwritten it or overridden it, but you add a D to the equation, which stands for dispute. You're going to dispute that belief system, because that belief system is probably irrational and is a carryover from your childhood and maybe some trauma or dysfunction and so forth. By disputing that belief system, now you can have an E, a new effect. So you have essentially rewritten that experience. Are you familiar with terminology?
It is all perception, isn't it?
Yeah.
A lot of it is
we're all
perception.
meaning makers. We're creating stories about the things that we see in the world, and most of it's not even true. Like somebody doesn't call us when they told us they'd call us, and we make up some story about how they're dissing us or they don't respect us or whatever, and they just had some indigestion and went to lay down, and it's like it's nothing
right. I often, when I catch myself in that kind of thing, I'm like, God, please, just check my attitude, because who knows what is going on in their life. Like, there could be X, Y, and Z. On the other hand, if this is a person that I just need to cut and create some boundaries from, allow me to understand that too.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it is, but you need, instead of wrapping myself up in a story that gets me spinning, like, I don't know the story. Like, I don't. So, it's that story of the guy on the train with the, children behaving badly, and someone snaps at them, and the man just says, "Oh, I'm sorry. We just came from the hospital. They just lost their mother." Your entire mindset changes then, once you understand their story. And I think that's for seniors, for me, the biggest thing that you can do is meet somebody where they're at. Really meet them where they're at right then, that moment. If they're 20 years old in their mind and you're their boyfriend, just be that guy. Don't say, "No, I'm your grandson." Just say, "Oh, you look so pretty today." Our job is not to force them into reality. I did a talk one time, and it was called "If You Love Me, Lie to Me," which got some haters, I will say. But it was about my grandmother and my nephew's death. And I said, with my grandmother, it's abusive to tell her over and over again that her great-grandson died. It's abusive when she asks where he's at. It's better to say, "Oh, he's not here yet. He'll be here tomorrow." There are certain times where protecting her reality is showing much more love than forcing her into a nightmare that gets repeated over and over again, like Groundhog Day.
Well, I know we're out of time, so if you could leave one passing word of wisdom for our listener, and your contact details or website or whatever you'd like to leave for our listener, what would that be?
Well, I would say what my nephew would always post, and it was to overuse "I love you." And to contact me, you can contact me at my website, lisamcini.com. So that's Lisa, Lisa, MCINI.
All right. And your books, and you've got the Amazon docuseries that we didn't even get to talk about.
It's a lot of fun. We've got a little supernatural in there. We've got some renovation. We've got, my parents are in it, but basically it shows, what the legacy was of my grandmother, now letting people to experience, technology and all kinds of aging in place stuff to help you live with more freedom and dignity as you age.
Yeah. And a docuseries is not just a documentary. So it's how many episodes?
6 episodes, but they're not super long, and they're very fun. We even won a Telly Award for them. So it was done very well by 22 Emmy Award-winning director Nick Nanton. And yeah, you can find that on Amazon, Infinite Living Secrets of the Werner House.
Awesome. And a Telly Award, that's kind of a big deal, right?
It was kind of a big deal. I didn't understand that. I'm like, well, we didn't go for an Emmy, but in our category, we won along with the BBC and ESPN, and apparently it's a little bit harder than an Emmy. So they did a fantastic job. They showed up with the cameras and we did us, but we told about our journey and the renovation of the house and spiritually clearing the house. So flew in Daniel White to do that from
Kim,
Austria.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah, so it's a really good, fast, quick thing that'll make you laugh, learn a little bit, and maybe make you cry.
Yeah, amazing. But by the way, Kim was a past guest on this podcast.
Oh, fantastic.
Yep. Yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah, for anybody that liked his stuff, there's episode 2 is all about him.
All right, well, we'll include all this in the show notes, and amazing conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right. And thank you, listener. We'll catch you on the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.